It's the Critics Circle with me, Charles Gross, and Leslie Hoban Blake. Tonight, a review of What the Constitution Means to Me and an interview with Jonathan Cerullo. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Critics Circle. Hello, Leslie.
Hello, Charlie. I thought I'd just start out really quickly by saying that we're doing this because we don't have any theater, and so we have no aisles to sit on. And we wanted to let you know what other people outside in the theater are doing during the pandemic and how they're pivoting and the kind of work that they're giving us. So, That said,
this is What's the Constitution Means to Me. I saw it off Broadway and on Broadway. The Broadway production, toward the end of it, was taped before the pandemic and is now available on Amazon Prime. This is Heidi Schreck, who recreates her 15-year-old self going from Legionnaire Hall to Legionnaire Hall, where she debated what the Constitution meant to her. This was a debating contest, and apparently she was good enough to win enough money to pay for her college tuition.
Which, as she tells us, it was a state college in several years ago, but yes.
Yes. So after recreating that, where she comes off kind of like Mary Tyler Moore on speed, she returns to her adult self and she gives us her family history. So it really is what the Constitution meant to her, how it affected her family, the failings of the Constitution and the failings of enforcement of the Constitution, and how her mother eventually broke the cycle of abuse in her family. I loved her performance. She's very energetic. She makes everything look spontaneous. And at the end of the show, she debates one of two actresses portraying high school students, Rose Deli Ciparin or Thursday Williams. All three times I saw Rose Deli, although in this production you see Thursday in the credits, as to whether the Constitution should be kept or whether it should be replaced with a totally new one. In the vast majority of the performances, the audience decided to keep the Constitution.
Yes, with raucous applause at the show that I was at. But again, this was before the Supreme Court and its excess of right-wing judges. Anyway, this is the way she wrote the show, so this is the show we're going to talk about. But that's the problem for me. I only saw it once. I loved it when I saw it. It moved me. I was actually crying at one point. None of that happened here. If anything, it seemed tedious because it is simple. For me, this is production-wise now. This has nothing to do with the script, which I loved, or her acting, which I loved. It has to do with simply being a couple of cameras looking at her for an hour and 45 minutes. It's a monologue. Yes, Mike Iverson comes in and says a few things, but it's basically a monologue.
He appears as a Legionnaire, and then he tells his story for a few minutes.
He plays a Legionnaire. He plays the guy at the end of the show who gets the audience worked up. The point is that there's nothing exciting about the way it's presented. The excitement was in the script for me when I sat in a theater and saw it with other people who were feeling it. There was an excitement in the audience. There was something happening in the audience. You don't get that sensation. You might hear a rustling. You don't really hear the kind of thing that, as we were sitting next to people who were saying, yes, that's what it's about. And I just expected something more from this. I expected this director, by the way, Marielle, the original director was Oliver Butler. This director is Marielle Heller. She directed the Fred Rogers movie In My Neighborhood. She directed the Can You Forgive Me movie about the woman who sold autographs, fake autographs, with Melissa McCarthy. So she's got credits. She knows how to do a movie. I wanted to see more. My expectations were raised by all of those things, and they were dashed when I watched it, and I'm really sorry to say that.
I have to say, I got exactly what I expected. I don't have a problem, with a long one-person monologue. I watch Jeff Dunham and his dummies all the time, and this goes for a lot longer than this show, and I love it. It depends if the material works. To me, the material works very nicely here. You may not always agree with everything she's saying. It does get you to
on the
think.
Contrary, I agree with everything she's saying. That's the whole point. That's why I'm so sorry to say. It's the production, the way it came across.
I don't see what more you can do with a one-person show.
Well, you take it out of the theater and you take it into a real hall and you have real old guys there watching it.
I don't think that would have made much of a difference for this. And I'm actually glad that the theatrical version was preserved.
Okay. All right, listen. if we're gonna go, we're not giving it playbills anymore.
Okay.
But obviously, you liked it a lot more than I did. Again,
Right.
I'm not talking about the script or the performance, both of which I liked. I'm talking about the production and the direction, I guess, is what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I was disappointed.
Okay. And again, this can be seen on Amazon Prime.
Right.
Okay. What do you do when you're a former Broadway dancer, current choreographer, director, producer who has nothing to choreograph, direct, or produce? Well, when you're Jonathan Cerullo, you put together an amazing Cats video using the old company that you danced in and make it a fundraiser for Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS, and the Actors Fund.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce yet another old friend. This time it's a little bit different, though. We've been talking to artistic directors of theater companies. We're going to be talking to a director, choreographer / producer who has just done a wonderful thing. He decided to, I'll let him tell you in his own words why, he decided to do a fundraiser for the Actors Fund and Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS during these dark times. And he came up with a really cool way of doing it, which is just so special to him alone. I mean, he and the group that did it could only have been the group that did it. So without further ado, Jonathan Cerullo of JSC Theatricals. Am I right about that? Did I get that right?
Leslie. Yes,
okay,
indeed,
very
you
good.
did.
Okay.
And
now, essentially, what you did was you reunited one of the original touring groups of Cats, and you had them basically perform numbers from the musical, but as a fundraiser for the Actors Fund. And the thing that I happened to notice when I was watching this is a lot more elaborate than your average Zoom production, which is what we've been seeing lately. How was this put together? How was it filmed? How was it? How did you do it? And what did you do?
Thank you for asking that, and thank you for having me on your program. I'm delighted. And Leslie and I go back many years.
many years.
with various theatrical outings and committees and all of that. So thank you for having me. So you are right, Charles. I did the third. There were 5 first-class productions of the show here in the United States. Broadway being the first, Los Angeles, a touring company, and then my company, which was considered National 3. And we played major cities across the country, over 40
Jonathan,
cities.
explain what you did in that company, because that's what I think is so cool.
So I was hired as Skimbleshanks, the railway cat. So when I was dancing and performing and kicking my heels up, I auditioned for the show, and it was my first big show that I got into. And being a professional dancer, it was the cat's meow, not to pun a phrase there, but the production took place over 2 years, and I stayed with the show the entire run of it. And about 9 months into the show, it was 1986-87. And I'll never forget, the news was interrupted by the announcement of the death of Michael Bennett, the legendary director, choreographer. And I shot up and I was like, what just happened? And I went into the theater that night, and I went to the men's dressing room, and I said, guys, I don't know about you, but I just can't sit still. We've got to do something. This is just ravaging our community, this mysterious illness. And one of the company members had done a national tour of Chorus Line. He says, well, let's tribute Michael Bennett. Let's do a tribute. This was 2 years before Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS was even a company. And we started, along with the La Caja Full Company, to do these pop-up benefits all across the country for various local organizations that were, catering to HIV/AIDS related illnesses. And we got very fancy with them after a while. And the first one that we did was the tribute to Michael Bennett, and we raised over $36,000 in one night. And if you compare that to today's money, that's something like $85,000 in today's money.
And where were you at the time?
So we performed this in Kansas City, Missouri, at a theater that was donated to us. We had it was a real grassroots mon pa. Let's put on a show. We rehearsed in between, in between our performances. We would go and sneak into hotel ballrooms, any kind of lobby that we could find, and we really put together a retrospective of Michael Bennett's work. The general managers of the show of Cats, Gatchel Neufeld, they heard of this. They came down and saw this, and they pulled. I directed it. Several other people also directed it too. There were segments that were directed by various other dancers in the show. I did the Follies section, but I had a whole part in putting the whole thing together. And they said to us, "Listen, you have something here. We have one rule: you cannot let this interfere with your performing Cats. But we encourage you to do this across the country." And like I said, we got very fancy. And at one point in time, we had Lily Tomlin and Jennifer Holliday join us. So it got to be something that we were really very proud of doing. Flash forward. Governor Cuomo shuts the theaters down in New York City. And I just saw my work go, cancellation, cancellation, cancellation. I was like, oh my God, is this actually happening to me? To us? Yes, it was. I get a phone call from one of the cast members of that company. And he said, "Jonathan, do you remember when we did the Michael Bennett?" I said, "Yes, of course I remember when we did that." "Well, what do you think if we," and I said, "Yes." He goes, I didn't even finish what I said, no, whatever you're going to ask me, I'm going to say yes. Because I just need to say yes. So what is it that you want? He goes, "What if we were to get everybody back together again?" And I immediately said yes. Austin Jaton was the inspiration behind all this. He's a dear friend. And I said, the only way I will do this, Austin, is if we do this to raise money for the Actors Fund. And that set us in motion. I wanted to do it properly. So I went through very specific channels. I asked my attorney how we should go about this. They said, "Cerullo, get permission. You don't want to mess around with Andrew Lloyd Webber." So one of our company
He's a
members,
lord, so of course not.
he is Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, exactly.
That's right.
Which we mentioned in the video. Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber, as eloquently spoken by Stokes. Anyway, so we had one of our company members was part of the Andrew Lloyd Webber entourage in terms of the she's doing Cinderella with him. Joanne Hunter is her name. And she got us to the Really Useful group. They gave us permission to do very specific things for the show. And we also had some very, very specific rules that we couldn't, we weren't reproducing the show. We had no intention of putting costumes or makeup on. We couldn't even intimate that in any way, shape, or form. And one of the things, I wrote a pitch for it, a treatment for what we were going to do. They loved it. And they gave us permission. And at one point in time, I said, I really would like to do the naming of cats, but do it as a poem, not as it's done in the show. And there was this pause, silence, and I was like, uh-oh. He goes, "Well, you're going to have to go to somebody else for that." And I said, "Well, who's the somebody else?" He goes, "You're going to have to go to the estate of T.S. Eliot." So I got to the estate of T.S. Eliot, and they gave us permission to oratorically read the naming of cats, which I don't know. I'm not sure that.
So in other words, if you had sung it, if you had used the music, you already had the rights to it. But since you were reciting it, you had to get additional rights.
Correct.
And
I had
Jonathan,
to get,
this was getting very complicated.
It took about a month to have all the clearances take place, and we had very specific rules about how we could what musical underscoring we could use. We had very specific ways of instrumentation on what we could play them on, piano, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very complicated.
But as long as we have already interrupted your flow, how did you get the band back together? How difficult was that?
So we put word out to absolutely everybody who did our show. And through Austin, the gentleman I just mentioned, he reached out on Facebook, basically. And he reached out to everybody and says, "We have this idea. Anybody who wants to take part in it, this is what we're doing." And over 30 company members jumped on the bandwagon. I was like, wow, that's that's a lot of people, and we had a great number involved to do this. It was just marvelous to get back with these very creative and wonderful people. Many of them have left the business and now are very successful in their own careers. And there are still many who are still in the industry. So it was a great eclectic mix there.
And Charlie's original question was, I think, also about technically how you got it to look so fabulous.
Well, I said this to the folks at Broadway Cares. I said, we're building the plane as we're flying it. So I don't even have some of the tools that we need to build the plane, but we're going to do it anyway. And I worked in film and television, so I had a basic understanding of some of those components, and I did apply those to this. One of the most challenging things was to get everybody to sing in unison. And what we did was we had a backing track, sort of like one would think of a karaoke track, laid down that was provided for us. We then put a piano accompaniment on top of that. We then put a vocal track on top of that, one person singing the entire Jellicle Songs number. You then put a conductor conducting on top of that. We sent that master tape to everyone in the company. They then had to have two instruments to record, to use. One to watch the conductor, to hear the song, and then one to actually record themselves. We asked people to do it in one take. We asked them to do two takes, one lip syncing and one not lip syncing. I then made reference videos for all of the different segments of the song. Like I said, I didn't want to redo the choreography or anything like that. And my objective as the director of it was to celebrate this landmark musical. And that's what we did. I hope we did, was we celebrated this incredible landmark musical, and that's
So
part of the joy of it.
essentially what you did was everybody would take a home video camera or whatever they had lying around. They would record themselves, send it to you. I have to
Little
say,
cameras.
okay, an iPhone works, I guess.
It was your iPhone, yeah.
We get free iPhones for showing that. We get free iPhones.
Works for me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But what really impressed me was the quality of the video,
Absolutely.
the quality of the
Thank you.
sound. I have listened. I have recordings of Cats. I have recordings of the original Broadway cast, and the lyrics do not come through as clearly as they do with your performance here.
Well, thank you. We had Brian Ronan, who is married to Joanne Hunter. Brian Ronan is a two-time Tony Award winning sound designer, and
That helps.
he was our sound engineer when we did the show. So I've known Brian for many years, as well as knowing Joanne. And I went to Brian. I was like, "Please, you have to help us here because I don't know how to do this. That's out of my capabilities." And so he was very gracious and
we're
really
going to break
worked
here, and
beautifully.
we're going to show 2 minutes of that incredible Jellicles. We picked a part where you can see everybody who's in it, and you can hear beautifully. And then we'll come back and we'll pick up where we left off. Okay.
Lovely.
Hi, I'm Brian Stokes Mitchell.
Yes, and I'm Tom Viola.
On behalf of the Actors Fund
And Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS.
we want to thank you all for joining us tonight.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. This is going to be a thrilling evening.
In 1982, Lord Andrew Lloyd Webber's innovative new musical, Cats, hit Broadway, and Broadway has never been the same. Based on the poems of T.S. Eliot, this show, with its spectacular staging, costumes, makeup, wigs, and of course its famous levitating tire, has been delighting audiences ever since.
Are you blind when you're born?
Can you see in the dark?
Dare you look at a king?
Would you sit on his throne?
Can you say of your bite that it's worse than your bark?
Are you comfortable walk when you're walking alone?
Because Jellicles are, and Jellicles
stew, Jellicles stew and Jellicles wood, Jellicles wood and Jellicles can, Jellicles can and Jellicles do. When you fall on your head, do you land on your feet? Are you tense when you sense there's a storm in the air? Can you find your way blind when you're lost in the street?
Do you know how to go to the heaviside lair?
Because Jellicles can and Jellicles do, Jellicles do and Jellicles can, Jellicles can and Jellicles do, Jellicles do and Jellicles can, Jellicles can and Jellicles do. Can you ride on a broomstick to places far distant? I'll tell you with candle, with book and with bell.
Were you Whittington's friend?
The Pied Piper's assistant.
Have you been an alumnus of heaven and hell?
Are you mean like a minx?
Are you lean like a lynx?
Are you keen to be seen when you're smelling a rat?
Were you there when the pharaohs commissioned the Sphinx?
If you were and you are, you're a Jellicle cat.
So you talked about how you got to everybody. How did you get to Stokes, Mitchell, and Tom Viola? I'm sure it wasn't hard to get them to agree, but how did you get to them?
Well, again, I used resources that I had in the industry, and you know, I've been doing this for over 35 years. So I hope that I've earned a reputation to garner the ask. And one of the company members, Lisa Dawn Cave, had just had worked with Stokes, and I've met Stokes over the years. And I called her up and I said, hey, listen, I really would like to get Brian Stokes Mitchell and Tom Viola, who I know. Tom is my neighbor, actually. He lives down the street from me. And again, I've known Tom for decades. And I said, hey, would you guys be interested in doing a tandem, you know, introduction? Would you be willing to be our hosts? And they were like, sure, absolutely. And somebody reminded me, they said, I don't think I've actually seen Brian Stokes Mitchell and Tom Viola in the same video at the same time. So you really have a unique ask there.
Now just to clarify, they introduce the segments, they talk about the Actors Fund, but they're not participating in the performance.
That is correct. They're
No,
not
we will
participating
show
in
that
the performance.
introduction. We will show a piece of that introduction, so that's clarified.
Yes.
And,
But they both jumped on the bandwagon tremendously. And I will say this too. During one of our meetings that we had, Tom said to me, he says, well, you know, Jonathan, you were the Hamilton of your times. This was the hottest show that went around the country, and it was a huge financial success. And I was grateful to be part of that. So that was fun.
No, absolutely. Now let's backtrack. Now that we've got there. So here's you, and you're 30 years ago. You are a hoofer, right?
Yes.
You said this
Yes.
was your first big break. So talk
Yes.
a little bit about how you came from doing that into directing, and it wasn't your choreography, then directing, and then producing.
Sure.
The shortened version.
I always knew that I wanted to direct. There was never a question about that. I knew that from a very early age. And I went to undergraduate and I earned my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Directing from Emerson College in Boston. And I knew my entree into the world of musical theater would be through dance. So I studied, you know, at the Joffrey Ballet. I was part of their apprenticeship company. I realized that I wanted to sing, so I took my toe shoes and marched uptown and started auditioning for shows, got into shows as a dancer, and then I would very carefully sit and watch rehearsals. And after I did Cats, I immediately went to do Legs Diamond with Peter Allen. And I'll never forget sitting in, I wasn't called one day, and the stage manager said to me, you know, Jonathan, you're not on the call sheet today. And I said, well, I am. And he goes, no, you're not. I said, well, I am, because I need to watch how the director is putting that scene together, and I need to watch how the choreographer is working with it. And he was like, okay, got it. Sit down. And I sat and I observed the director, and that, I danced for a couple more years after that. And then I got the phone call from my dear friend, Patricia Birch,
Sure.
who said to me, I'll never forget it. She said to me, "You're too good for the chorus. I'm taking you out of the chorus, and I need an assistant." And I spent the next 13 years working with Pat Birch as her sole and exclusive assistant. And then as soon as I left, other assistants came to work with her. But it was through that mentorship that I really, I owe so much of what I do today. Every time I walk into a rehearsal room, Pat walks in with me. She's
And of course,
here,
she did shows such as Grease and the first Hal Prince Candide, among many others.
A Little
What shows
Night
did you
Music,
work with her
Zoot
on,
Suit.
Jonathan?
So I did on Broadway. I did Anna Karenina at Circle in the Square. I did a musical called Band in Berlin, which we did at the Helen Hayes Theater. We worked in Amsterdam together on a big show at Cy Coleman called Grace, which was about Princess Grace. We went up to Canada and did a couple of shows up there. We did a number of films together, The First Wives Club, Stepford Wives. We worked together on the Donny Osmond television special,
Wow.
and Natalie Cole, and all kinds of wonderful
Was that
things.
Band in Berlin? Was that about the cabaret with the K?
Yes.
Was that? I think I saw that. I remember
Yes.
that. That's a period I'm very okay.
Yeah, very
Wow.
very close to my heart. Yeah, the Weimar Republic.
Jonathan, but before we let you go, I just want to know what plans you have for the future and how your weather, aside from this Cats,
I'm available.
Okay.
Well, I was supposed to be working on right now. I think we would have opened like tonight November 3rd we were going to open.
Oh, wow.
So no, I'm sorry. No. This past weekend, I was working on a musical called Essential Stories that was written by Jen Chapin, who was the daughter of Harry Chapin. But of course that had to, take a hiatus.
Sure.
But I'm trying to figure out this new medium now and figuring out how to work it and what to do. So like I said, I am for hire, as we say.
Well, you can also use your fundraiser as a like, here's what I can do, guys, because
I would love to. Yeah.
Brilliant.
That was
So-
Charlie, thank you for pointing out. It was very, very complicated to put that together. And one of my friends who actually does work in film and television out in California, he goes, I have never seen a log sheet that is so detailed as your log sheet for this. I said, I don't know how else to do it. It's just what we did. So anyway,
we're gonna
if this were a different venue, I would ask you for a point-by-point detail.
Again, Jonathan, thank you so very much for all that you've done.
I appreciate
and that
it.
you're
Yes,
about
thank
to do.
you.
Thank you very much for watching, and Leslie and I will see you in the Critics Circle.
If you touch me, you'll